of open source activists and so on. So
Yeah.
obviously there's a mix of the two, but the question is, it feels like when you move into government and you work on services, there's not a lot of time to do activism anymore.
It depends. I think yes, the days are very long, so you don't have a lot of spare time to do anything, but it doesn't mean that you
not
have
time,
to...
like perspective, because all of a sudden you're the government, right?
Right. So it's a great question, and we have a very wide range of folks who are working with us. Everybody from, and we've recently poached 2 of the top engineers from Facebook. We have, I'm standing inside of a Google building, so I'm just waiting for Google to get really mad at us, but we've...
They have their voice recognition.
I know. They're probably getting ready to, they recognize my face walking into all the campuses because we do recruiting events inside Google, and it's just like shooting fish in a barrel. It's so great. But we've coached a lot of the SRE team at Google. It's been a really great program that we've been working with. The person who ran DevOps for Twitter from when it was in the fail whale days to where it is now working with us. We have 4 of the founding engineers from Amazon. So we've got a lot of people who have run services at scale and are quite candidly could go work wherever they wanted to, or they could retire. And so they're getting to kind of choose to do this. But we also have a bunch of folks, including one of the lead developers from WordPress and the person who runs PyCon, and a lot of people from the open source community working with us as well. And they haven't stopped, and we've encouraged them not to stop participating in the open source communities that they have built with their own hands, because we think that makes this so much more valuable. And that is how we start changing the culture of making sure that people understand, as a technologist and as an engineer, you can go serve your government and you can make your government better, because no one else is going to do it if we don't do it. And you shouldn't have to change who you are as a person to be able to do that. You should still be able to run all the open source communities.
I actually meant political activism rather than open source.
Yeah, the people still. So the only time that it gets tricky is during election years, when if you're working inside the White House, there's certain things you can and can't do with public money. But outside of that as well, you're still an individual with with opinions and ideas, and you don't have to be censored from that as well. Working in the United States government, at least, I don't know how to say that. Yes. There's so many, but one of the biggest ones, well, actually, to be honest, it's a question in 2 ways. One is that many of the problems that we have that are the hardest are not the technology problems. It's the culture change, it's the management, it's making sure that people actually prioritize and understand the value of incorporating technologists and data scientists and everyone into problem solving from square one. And we are making tons of headway on that right now, thank you to the healthcare.gov fiasco and things like that leadership understand that you have to do this now. This is not, in today's world, you can no longer separate technology from policy implementation and from great ideas, and that is just something that those two go together, and this needs to be prioritized. So on one hand, a lot of the things that we do are pretty management focused and figuring out how you can actually optimize teams for building well. But there are a lot of technology challenges as well. Most of those end up in the unfortunate reality that things like our like critical systems, such as our Social Security Administration, all of the paychecks that are cut off of that right now are running on a mainframe and COBOL, which we don't everyone who knows COBOL is either retiring or dying, so it's very hard to work in those environments.
Got here late, so maybe some people here know.
Yeah, if you know COBOL, let me know. Well, I'll give you a job out. So we have a lot of challenges like that. We are working with, as we were kind of talking about before, with a lot of legacy systems that are gigantic and have unfortunately been developed over the decades matching the silos of government. So instead of saying, let's have one product and we want to add a new feature to it, it's a different team has a different idea and they build an entirely different service, which is not totally related, and there's some, there's crazy integration problems. And so fixing, it would be easy if it was one system, but in many cases, like veterans benefits right now, I think there's like 18 different bespoke systems that actually are involved in issuing a veteran benefits. And so it becomes much harder to identify even the problem statement, because you start looking into one and then you realize it's in the other, and it's pretty complicated. So, but usually, candidly, it's mostly management or management problems.
Think of just starting from scratch in some cases.
We have thought of that recently. In some of them. Yeah, but that's one of the things we try and assess the various systems or services and pick off the parts that are easy to rebuild. So that was one of the first things we did with healthcare.gov was we identified where most of the outages were coming from, and it turned out 70% of them were coming from an identity management situation or a solution. So we ended up keeping that running, and in the background we're building a new one, which we built at less than a tenth of the cost. And the first management system was tens of millions of dollars and had about a 25% error rate. And the second one we built for less than a couple $1 million, and it has a 0% error rate. And we were able to then phase that piece in without dismantling the entire, the rest of the system. So,
would you be willing to share with us some failure that you think that you've learned from, especially when it comes to what we find most interesting is open government, open data policies, and the road that one should maybe not take, right? Or
yeah. Let's see. There's a lot of things I would do. I think one of the big learnings from the open data that we've tried to apply to the United States Civil Service is really emphasizing on the educational aspects and helping leadership understand what the value is. Because so many people who are in decision-making positions don't come from the world in which we operate, and so you have to spend a lot of time working on describing the value, showing the value, not just describing the value. And so at the end, one of my dear friends, Erie, got this great idea to we regularly got the question of like, well, what's an API? We're like, oh no, like it's an API, and we'll tell you and instead of just telling you about them, why don't we build them together? So we did an executive API training, which no one came to it when it was just an API training. When we called it an executive API training, all of a sudden it was like booked out the door, and everyone was like, oh, well, this is okay if I don't know what I'm talking about, because it's for high level, and I'm a leadership position, so I can come to the executive API training. And it was amazing, because that's how you start getting the light bulbs going off and people understanding how and why this is so valuable. And so we spent a lot of time, particularly at the senior leadership level, trying to educate and help show how and why it's so important to prioritize this kind of work. That's one thing I highly recommend is
having executives.
Yeah, executive education.
Executive hackathon.
We're having an executive hackathon in 3 weeks.
So I have a question. You mentioned that most, if not all, of the work at the USDS is focused around making government services available to citizens. So one of the projects we have here is Open Pension. Means making the investment portfolios of the major pension plans in Israel accessible to citizens, because we realize that most citizens don't really know what's going on in pension plans and how the money is invested. So it's really kind of different than what you're doing, basically, because it's sharing information from the private sector.
Yeah.
It's not the government. So I was wondering whether there's an attempt or some work done in 401ks or government pension plans are accessible, because I think it's probably the same in the US. People don't really like talking about pension and sport.
I'm thinking about that right now, and I apologize I don't know this, but I think that we have all of that information actually open right now. I don't think it's not open in the United States. Yeah, I'm pretty sure. That is a great distinction and an important distinction and a great question. It's probably, just to guess, it's probably not very open, but it's definitely accessible. But I think that's all required to be public in this case. So not a, but it sounds like an absolutely fascinating project, and sort of similar to a lot of the work that we've been doing with the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, when you look at the relationship between private sector and the government and how we can actually help protect the consumer or the citizen or the pension earner. But the CFPB has been doing a ton of amazing work on. Oh, I'm so sorry. CFPB stands for the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, and it was a new agency. I'm so sorry. I try and scrub acronyms out of my language and I forget sometimes. Every now and then. But it's a new agency that the president built in his first term, and it was spawned out of the financial crisis, where so many homeowners were getting their houses foreclosed on, and the banks were saying that and there was this he said she said game between the banks and the homeowners around the foreclosure, and a lot of lack of information and understanding of how and why these foreclosures were happening. And so he created an entire organization inside government to work on financial protection of citizens. And one of the first plays that this agency did was actually a transparency play, where they required, they actually enabled citizens to file complaints with the federal government around foreclosures and other financial problems. And then they made that data open, and they released it, not the specific consumer data so that they could protect privacy of the people who are getting foreclosed on, but they released the data around the specific banks and the response rate the banks had to the complaints, and the number of the bank with the most number of complaints. And at first, the entire financial institution was freaking out that this was going to be a huge problem, and then they quickly realized it was a point of competition amongst them. And so you had the financial institution, the financial industry, going from hating the CFPB to actually they have an incredible technology team, so it's a very easy to use interface. But they were able to use this as a competition point amongst their competitors to say, oh, we reply to the complaints the fastest, we have the least number of complaints out of any other bank. And it was this incredible moment where transparency was able to completely shift the paradigm and the incentive structure for the banks actually providing better services for the customers, which was not technically through regulation from government, it was just through government actually enabling a new channel of communication from customers to the industry. So yeah, not totally related, but sort of. Yeah, I'd love to hear what you guys are working on.
Just another question. Two little ones. First of all, what happens if the next administration wants to change something, like reverse?
Yeah.
Is it even possible now that everything is open source? And how will people react?
Yep.
And the second question is, do you use any components that are not open source, like Google Maps or other?
Yes. So the first one is a great question and one we've been thinking about, and this is another reason why we are such big proponents of open source, because we believe by doing all of this in the open, we make it easier for people to actually see what's happening, what's being built, and actually be able to contribute to and participate in that, but also acknowledge when if it's being changed and that's not the right thing. So we create a whole other access point for citizens to help ensure that this work carries on. But I fundamentally believe that if we continue to deliver the results that we are delivering right now, there will be no reason for the next administration not to invest in this. Hypothetically, they could. We have been working very strategically to make sure that it is as easy as possible for this to carry into the next administration. It will, at least for the first year and a half or two, given the way that if Congress passes the budget and everything along those lines. But so there will be some carryover. We won't turn into pumpkins at all. But we did not, we very intentionally did not create a new permanent structure inside government, because candidly, that is part of why government is so hard to work in today, because you have so many previous movements and previous attempts that mandated there be a chief whatever officer who are now still sitting there 10 years later, 20 years later, and not being effective. And so, to be honest, if this doesn't work, I hope we don't exist in the next administration. But right now, we are delivering amazing results, and if we continue to provide better services at a fraction of the cost that we are today, there should be no reason why the next administration won't want to continue this work. So I'm incredibly confident and not worried about that at all. We'll have a lead time no matter what. So very, very much looking forward to see how that goes. And actually, I'm incredibly excited for the administration change, because it'll be an amazing opportunity to further look at how we can build a stronger team You've got a lot of different opportunities when you have someone coming into office and someone leaving. So that'll be fun. And remind me of your second question. Sorry, it was
If you use something that is not open source.
Oh yes, so the federal government does use a lot of closed source things, and that we don't have control over as much. But when we build things, we always build open. When it's something, and this is baked into the federal government in a very, very real way with our public domain piece. And anything a federal employee builds is part of, or if you do research as a governmental employee, all of your work is part of the public domain, which means anybody can use it. And we are actually working right now on, we're working on an open source policy for the United States of America that we are incredibly, incredibly excited about. We're just sort of getting the ball rolling, and once we get that moving, that will all be available for you to watch and see how it progresses. But the whole point of that is clarifying that just like when you do research and you are a federal employee, that is public domain. When you are an engineer in the federal government and you build code, that should also be open source. This is something that everyone should be able to use. Exactly. The taxpayers paid for it, and so the taxpayers should get to use it. This is part of.
Does that also mean that you wouldn't need
no. Yeah, because unfortunately, if the federal government spends over $86 million a year on technology, and if we were to all of a sudden remove all of the, we would have pretty big impact on the technology economy in the United States, which is one of our most thriving sectors. So we don't want to do something that we don't want to actually.
So do you have like guidelines for user privacy of these services? You're basically giving Google voice recognition. You're basically giving Google and other companies a backdoor to knowing about how citizens interact with government.
So
there should be expectation of privacy.
Yes, absolutely. We have just recently hired one of actually the foremost privacy experts in Silicon Valley. Alex Miller, he is the general counsel at Twitter. He's been coming and doing some incredible work on privacy inside the White House, which we're just thrilled to have here. But the United States government is so large, and if you were to take each of the independent agencies and roll them off into the private sector, they would be larger than Fortune 500 companies. I mean, these are gigantic institutions. And so there's very little consistency in the tools that are used across them. So it's not like we are saying to the United States government, everyone, when you're using a mapping platform, you have to use there's a lot of different solutions and different tools, and it's because it's such a big industry. It's not like a small one company, it's a gigantic industry. There's a lot of variance. So we're actually, it's.
But do you recommend towards tools that are not sharing private data with performance operations?
Absolutely. Privacy protections are required. Before you purchase a tool or publish something, there's privacy controls where you're required to go through certification to make sure you're not putting any sort of user data at risk. So there's a bunch of controls on that, but we don't. So when you're buying or building a service, but we don't say you have to use a specific service all the time. Just make sure we don't want to sway markets. Because if you specify a specific service, then maybe you are creating a company that has a tool, and 2 years later that's on the market and the dominating tool. We will fall behind the industry if we overregulate the open space. So we focus on ensuring privacy of information and not privacy of information.
You're working mostly on the executive branch.
Yes.
The project I'm working is on legislative. Yeah, working on the laws. Israel codex. US, you have US codex, which is open. So some once amended, you have it on. Here we don't have it.
Yeah.
So, but my question is more on the legislative process. So when someone, the congressman wants to put in a bill, he has the final current law codex, and he wants to amend it. I'm working on the project to give him tools and see, get feedback from the citizens.
Sorry, it sounds like
I'm working on a project to provide the legislator to get feedback on
yeah, we as the White House are not, just because of where we're focused. But there are a lot of groups that are working on similar tools. I'm forgetting there was an amazing... Yeah, I'm totally blanking on the name.
In the government. In Europe, it's a communication.
Not inside the government. These are all actually outside of government working to help the lawmakers. Here, because of the jurisdiction and kind of where we focus, we do a very similar thing with regulations, because the executive branch governs regulations, which is sort of very similar to laws, but on the executive side, yeah. So we are building, and you should take a look at it. This is the tool you're using. It's all open source. You can find it actually on MT's website. They are building on etnf or etnf.gov. But they're building entirely, it's a beautiful platform, and it's all open source, and it makes it easy to teach very complicated regulations for builders written in a language that we speak. You have to reread them 6 times to actually understand what it says. And then there is a series of, they come out for public comment, they're taken back in, they're released again, they're put out for public comment, and it's very hard to tell where the changes were actually made. So it basically does a diff of the regulation before, the regulation after, and then you can comment on a specific line instead of, it's like a very similar interface to GitHub, sort of, but actually you can use it. And it's focused on helping citizens be able to comment and understand what's changed in the regulations and actually offer specific feedback on what's in it. So you should look at the code base. It's useful.
Our basic question was about, say someone comes to he's about something that was changed twice in the last 5 years, and his conviction is about something that happened 5 years ago. So how does the judge know the words of the law? Not currently, just 5 years ago. That's a major issue here.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it sounds like an amazing project. I wonder if you guys do have a certain
So maybe this would be nice for some people to talk about what they're doing.
Yeah,
because we've and let you drink your beer.
Which is right here. You guys put it here.
Our sellers.